Today I'll give an overview of the iOS H2OPro app. You should have already connected the H2OPro controller to your home Wi-Fi. If not, please refer to the video tutorials which show how to do this. Also, in this overview, I will demonstrate an H2OPro controller with no flow meters installed. Without flow meters attached to the H2OPro controller, some of the advanced features of the H2OPro system will not be available. Let's go ahead and launch the app. Once the app connects to the H2OPro controller, a few things can be found on the home screen. A table with alerts is shown at the top of the screen. In this case, no flow meters are attached to the system, so this is indicated in the table. Keep in mind, however, that even if your system has flow meters installed, you may still see this message when the app is first run. This is because it takes time for the system to detect if flow meters are installed or not for any zone. If flow meters are attached to the system, this alert will change after the system has cycled valves on and off. Below this table, there is a Clear Alerts button. This button is used after physically repairing a malfunctioning irrigation system or clearing false alerts. The name of your controller is shown below the Clear Alerts button. The factory default is H2OPro, but you can change the name on the Settings tab. Finally, there are two indicators at the bottom of the screen which display any currently running watering schedules as well as the next zone to run, assuming you have created and installed watering schedules. Now let's take a look at manual controls. This tab is used to manually activate any valves in your irrigation system. By touching a specific zone button, the valve will be activated and the timer will start incrementing. At the bottom of the screen, the auto shutoff time is shown. This auto shutoff time can be varied between 1 and 30 minutes. In this case, any valve will automatically shut off once the valve on time reaches 1 minute. Since this system has no flow meters installed, the volume and flow will be zero even when the valve is activated. Of course, if a zone has a flow meter associated with it, then actual volume and flow of water would be displayed for that zone. An important point to note: the first time a valve is activated, the manual controls display may not update immediately. This is because the system checks if there is a flow meter associated with the activated zone valve. This process can take up to 60 seconds when you activate a valve for the first time. Therefore, when first activating any zone valve, keep the valve on for 60 seconds before shutting it off. This sequence will only happen the first time a zone valve is activated. After the first activation, the valve will respond immediately when activated unless you have changed hardware and press the Reconfig button on the Flow Meters tab of the app. This is only done when you have removed or added flow meters to your irrigation system, in which case the system will again need to check if flow meters are associated with the activated valve. The factory default zone names are Zone 1 to 8, but you can change the names to something more descriptive, like backyard or vegetable garden. This is done by selecting the zone information. On the zone information screen, the zone name can be changed and water use for the specific zone is displayed in terms of gallons or dollars. In addition, the water use data is stored for up to 1 year, so you can select to display 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, or 1 year of data. In order to display the water use in dollars, you need to enter your average water rate on the User tab. In this case, no data is available for display since there are no flow meters installed in this irrigation system. Let's go ahead and change the name for Zone 1 to Flowers. The name change will then update on the manual controls screen and is stored in the H2OPro controller memory. Now let's look at the Schedules tab. The Schedules tab shows the current calendar week and any programmed watering schedules for that week. The current date and time are highlighted in red along the X and Y axis. A number may be displayed at the end of the last weekly run for each schedule. This number indicates the estimated water use each time the schedule runs. In this example, there are no flow meters attached, so the estimated water usage is not available for each schedule. Each color represents a different programmed watering schedule which has been installed on the H2OPro controller. The user may install up to 5 watering schedules on the H2OPro controller. Let's create a new watering schedule. Let's start by giving it a simple name. In this case, let's call it trees. And we'll start the schedule in the morning, say at 9-10 a.m. And we'll run the schedule on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And zone 1, which we're calling flowers, will run for about 60 minutes. Zone 2 will run for about half of that or so. We could also add zone 3 to zone 8 times as well, but for this purpose, let's just use zone 1 and zone 2 for now. And we could also go ahead and cancel the schedule if we aren't happy with what we've created, or we can go ahead and save it. Let's save the trees schedule. After creating a new watering schedule, you'll notice that it is not displayed on the weekly calendar. This is because the watering schedule has been created and stored on your phone, but still needs to be installed on the H2OPro controller. To do this, we need to use the Manage Edit Schedules button. When the Manage Edit Schedule button is pressed, a list of program schedules, which are stored in memory on your phone, is displayed. Since your phone essentially has an unlimited amount of memory, you can store an almost unlimited number of schedules on your phone. From these watering schedules, you can choose 5 schedules at any time to install on the H2OPro controller. Watering schedules which have been installed on the H2OPro controller display a color bar which corresponds to the same color displayed on the weekly calendar. If no color bar is displayed, then the watering schedule is stored on the phone, but not installed and ready to run on the H2OPro controller. Let's go ahead and install the schedule which we just created onto the H2OPro controller. After pressing the Install button, the schedule appears on the weekly calendar and is set to run as scheduled. Once a schedule is created, it can be modified by touching the information icon on the Manage Edit Schedules tab. After modifying the schedule, press Save to update the schedule in memory. In this case, let's press Cancel and make no changes. At any time, you can uninstall specific watering schedules. Doing so will remove the schedule from the H2OPro controller and the weekly calendar, but will not remove the schedule from the list of available schedules on your phone. If you want to delete a watering schedule entirely, simply press the trash can icon and the schedule will be deleted from both your phone and the H2OPro controller if it has been installed there. Now we have removed the watering schedule, which we just created, from both the phone and the H2OPro controller. Let's take a look at the Settings tab next. At the top of the settings screen is the name of the irrigation controller, which is set to H2OPro by default. You can change the name of the controller to something more personal, such as My H2OPro. The name is then updated in the controller memory and on the home screen. The home screen now reads, Connected to My H2OPro. Below the controller name are controls for Seasonal Adjust and Flow Alert limits. Seasonal Adjust allows you to scale all watering schedules currently installed on the H2OPro from 25% to 100%. This could be used, for example, if you want to keep the watering schedules the same, but reduce watering by 50% in the fall compared to the summer months. The watering schedules displayed on the weekly calendar will reflect any changes made to the seasonal adjust percent. For example, let's set seasonal adjust at 50% and then check their watering schedules on the weekly calendar. Notice that the duration of all watering schedules has been reduced by half. For now, let's put the seasonal adjust back to 100%. Below seasonal adjust is the flow alert limits. If flow meters are installed, the system will learn the typical flow for each zone and alerts will be triggered when the water flow for any zone is outside the range set by the limits. Limits can be varied between 15% and 45%. If the flow for a zone exceeds 50% of the typical flow for that zone, then not only is an alert triggered, but in addition, the valve will be shut off automatically. In order to receive email alerts, the email alert button needs to be enabled and valid email address needs to be entered on the user tab. When the H2OPro controller is first set up and valves are first activated, the system will learn the typical flow for each zone. At that time, your irrigation system should be in good working order because these flow measurements are used to set the reference typical flow for each zone. This in turn is used to determine if there is a leak or high flow in the system and whether to trigger an alert. If changes are made to the irrigation system, such as repairing a leak to clear an alert, then the Reset Learning button should be pressed. This will cause the system to relearn the typical flow for each zone when valves are activated. The table at the bottom of the Settings tab shows all schedules which are currently installed and available to run on the H2OPro controller. For each schedule, there are two buttons. The Schedule button can be used to turn a schedule on or off. If turned off, the schedule will remain installed on the H2OPro controller, but it will be inactive. An inactive schedule is indicated on the weekly calendar by an outline rather than a filled line. This feature is useful if you only want to temporarily stop a schedule from running. Let's go ahead and turn a schedule off. As you can see, the deactivated schedule is shown as an outline. Let's turn the schedule back on. The Weather button is used to enable or disable auto weather controls. In order to utilize this function, your zip code should be entered on the User tab. The User tab can be found by first pressing the More tab. The User tab allows for entry of your 5-digit zip code to enable local weather monitoring controls, your email address for receiving alerts, and your water rate for converting between gallons of water used and cost. Your water rate can be entered in either dollars per gallon or dollars per CCF. This optional information is only stored on the H2OPro controller and your phone. Besides the User tab, there are several other tabs available. The Flow Meters tab shows a matrix chart which graphically displays which zones have flow meters associated with them on the y-axis and to which physical zone terminals the flow meters are wired on the x-axis. When the H2OPro controller is first started up and before valves have been activated for the first time, all elements in the matrix are yellow because auto detection has not yet completed. After zone valves have been activated at least once for about 60 seconds, the controller will determine if a flow meter is or is not associated with each zone valve. If a flow meter is associated with a zone valve, then the cell will turn green, but if no flow meter is associated with a particular zone valve, then the cell in the matrix will become red. In this example, there are no flow meters installed, so all cells in the matrix will eventually become red, but some valves have not been activated yet, so these cells are currently yellow. Below the matrix, there is a table which displays the typical water flow which has been learned for each zone if flow meters are installed. In addition, the last flow measured is displayed. If the last run flow is more or less than the typical flow, plus or minus the alert limits which have been set on the Settings tab, then an alert will be triggered. If the irrigation system is modified, for example, such as flow meters are added, then press the Reset Config button. This will restart the auto detect sequence, and the system will check if flow meters are present for each valve, and new typical flow values will be learned for zones with flow meter capability. When the auto detect sequence is restarted, all cells in the matrix chart will turn yellow again until the system has completed auto detection of flow meters for each zone valve. The Total Water tab is similar to the individual zone information, which displays water use in terms of gallons or dollars for up to 1 year. In this case, however, the water use for all 8 zones combined is displayed rather than individual zones. Finally, the About tab indicates which firmware version is currently running on the H2OPro controller. New firmware will be automatically downloaded to the H2OPro controller via the internet when updates are available. So that completes the H2OPro iOS app overview. If you have any questions, please send email to support@hotsocket.com and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.